Hello and welcome to Essentially Sports. Today we have a really special guest with us. So, without wasting any time, let's get into it. A wise man once said, never be a jack of all and a master of none. But today, we have a master of not one but five sports, a national champion, a world champion, and an Olympic champion, all striked off at just 28. So, without any further ado, I would like all of you to give a hearty welcome to a not so average Joe, Joseph Chong.
Hi, yeah, thank you for having me on the show. I'm really excited to have a chat with you today.
Okay, so let's get right into it. The biggest talk of this year is Paris Olympics.
Yeah,
So, how are you feeling? We are just 190 days left for the big night.
I mean, it feels like it's going really quickly to get to Paris. I did really well last year, so I sort of secured my qualification spot for Paris, and that's taken a lot of pressure off, sort of going around the world chasing world ranking points to qualify, and it just means I can really focus on myself and sort of be a bit fussy about which competitions I want to do. So no, I'm actually really excited to see what I can do. Yeah, when Paris comes around.
So how is the training going? I mean, as the pentathlete world champion, or I would say the Olympic champion, how is the training going?
It's going really well. We've just got back from 2 week training camp in Sicily to get away from some of the British cold weather. And yeah, it was just fantastic out there. It was, yeah, so much nicer than here. It's been a bit of a shock to come back and have my first session today in the rain and the wind. But no, like it's probably the best I've ever felt at this sort of point in the season, where like in terms of the times I'm running on the track, times I'm doing in the pool. And so everything's kind of like looking really positive for when we start the competition season in about a month now.
So help me understand, with 190 days left, how does your training schedule look like? I mean, you just said that you have already qualified, right?
Yeah.
So are there any other competitions where we will see Joe before the Olympics?
Yeah, definitely. Like from a sort of personal point of view, I like to hit the ground running almost to have a few competitions like to practice different things that we've been working on and make sure that everything sort of that we're doing in training is paying off when it comes to a competition. So my first competition will be in Budapest in about a month's time from now. In yeah, so what's that? That's going to be sort of end of February, and then after that, there's two World Cups, which and then hopefully, assuming that I do well in those and nothing disastrous happens, I'll have like my last preparation competition, which will be the World Cup final in Turkey, and then after that, it will be sort of an 8 week big training block all the way until Paris. So no, I'm really happy with like how we've laid out the year. There's lots of space to have training, but also enough competitions to sort of test myself. So yeah, no, it's a really nice balance.
I mean, that's too intense, I would say, but I think that's the mentality of a Olympic champion. So that just gets me thinking. I mean, there are always pros and cons of being an Olympic champion. Does it actually get really lonely at the top?
There's definitely been a like mentality change for me in comparison to before Tokyo. Like one of my coaches puts it quite nicely. He said, I've gone from being one of the chasers where I'm always like looking at the best and trying to catch them up, whereas now I'm the one that's being chased, and I've got to find like there's a different motivation of trying to stay at the top because you've not got anyone to compare yourself to. It's just how do you keep improving yourself like against the clock basically. Um, and yeah, like I definitely noticed the difference going into the fencing part of pentathlon where it feels like people have been specifically targeting me, maybe watching like videos of me fencing, and I've had to be quite clever and try and like add new things in that people won't expect so that I don't become too predictable.
Right, right. So it's safe enough to say that people chasing your spot is what keeps you going.
Yeah, definitely. Like I think there's five sports and therefore kind of five times the possibility of making a mistake in one of them. And it makes it really, really hard. I think it's one of the hardest sports to be consistent at the top, and that's something that I take quite a lot of pride in. Is that I've been sort of world number one over the last 2 years, Olympic champion before that, and obviously that was disrupted with COVID. Um,
Mm.
so yeah, for me, it's been all about trying to be quite clever with where can I get those small gains and in like the most efficient way possible. Because at the end of the day, you can't be absolute. You can't be Olympic level at all five sports. You've got to make like work out where to improve, where the improvements are going to come from.
Exactly, exactly. And I believe that you have mentioned that your inspiration comes from Ash, Pikachu's trainer, if I'm not wrong, right? That's what you believe in?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Yeah, I'm saying that once, like recently, you mentioned that your inspiration comes from Ash, the Pikachu's trainer from Pokemon.
Yeah, I think I was saying that was in relation to you got to catch them all. I was trying to
Yeah,
complete
exactly.
my medal tally, yeah, from and unfortunately I don't think I'll have done it because I got silver at the Europeans last year, and that's now not on my program this year. So, yeah, I've missed one, but I've got all the others, so it's not too bad.
But that just makes me think, is there any athlete that you take any inspiration from?
Yeah, so I've always said that I wanted to be my own athlete. So I wouldn't say that I've had like a role model growing up as such. Like, I've always wanted to sort of create my own path, be my own person. But at the same time, there's definitely athletes that you see on TV or within my sport that I admire certain things about them. So, for example, there was the Russian who won in 2016, Alex Lasun.
Yeah,
And admittedly, it wasn't a good time for Russians with all like the doping allegations. But the thing that just amazed me about Alex was that he was so efficient. He didn't need to be incredible at swimming or running. He was just so efficient with the technical events. So he was the best fencer in pentathlon. He always shot well. He always rode well. And so whether or not he was involved in this Russian doping scandal, he was the best pentathlete because he didn't need to be doping. To be honest, he was so good at the others, and that's something that I've tried to sort of take forward myself is be efficient. Like you can push yourself as hard as you want in the run and swim, but at the same time, like you can use a lot of sort of mental ability to gain extra points in the technical events, and that's what I've tried to sort of emulate.
correct. So you mentioned about the entire doping scandal. What are your thoughts about Russia? Like, I mean, you must be aware of the entire Olympic controversy going on
Yeah.
where Russian athletes are banned, right? So what do you think about that?
I've not actually put a huge amount of thought into it because, like, from a personal point of view in modern pentathlon, as far as I know, all the Russians and Belarusians are sort of sponsored by their military. Like, they're all members of the military, and that's how they're funded to do the sport. And so, as far as I'm aware, they won't be allowed to compete this year. So I'm not expecting to really see them much this year. So nothing's changed for us.
So is there any art rival that you will miss competing against at the Olympics?
Yeah, like definitely some of there was one Belarusian, Ilya Palazkov,
Yeah.
who was one of the best before Tokyo. There was a great Russian who I competed with like ever since I was sort of 17, so for nearly 12 years, Alex Lifanov, and
Yep.
they were some of the best athletes in the world. So it does, from a pure sporting perspective, it does take away from I guess the Olympic like spectacle by not having some all the best athletes competing together. But at the same time, you've got to do what's right for sort of humanity and human rights. So luckily, that's not down
Absolutely.
to me to make a decision.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I was just going through your Instagram and I came across the fact that you were in Paris, I believe 2 years back.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So would you like to tell us any places like just for our fans, where can they go while they come visit you to see your event?
yeah. So when I've been to Paris before, we've spent a lot of time around INSEP, which is like their national training center, and there's a lot of, I guess, for anyone who likes to go and go for runs or something, it's like an amazing forest. You can just sort of get lost in this forest and go cycling, running for just miles and miles without seeing any roads. So you kind of forget that you're in a big city like Paris, which is amazing. Um, and then more recently, yeah, we went back and sort of saw the Olympic venue, which is going to be right next to the Castle of Versailles, which is obviously like a really historic landmark. And yeah, no, I think that once they sort of put all the spectator seating up, they put the horse riding arena in, it's just going to look absolutely incredible with that castle in the background. So, like, fingers crossed, it's one of the best sort of venues at the Olympics.
Can you tell us more about the Olympic venue? I mean, are there any favorite spots that you already have? or maybe some places that excite you for the Paris Olympics venue?
Um, so when we went on our sort of scouting trip to see, I think it's one of the first Olympics where there's less of a sort of central Olympic park,
Right.
and it's a lot more spread out amongst the city, sort of to make it more sustainable, because obviously building a whole village is not good for the environment. Um, but where we are is a lovely place. Versailles, very nice. There were, yeah, as I said, it's the castle. There's a big park, and unfortunately, I can't speak for where the other sports are going to be because we haven't gone to see it. But I'm sure that Paris will do a good job.
Right, right. So, and I believe that you went to Paris with your girlfriend 2 years back.
Yes, we have training
Right.
camps there. So I've never actually been to Paris as a tourist on holiday, but lots of training.
Right. So, just that comes to mind. I mean, how does it feel to, date somebody who specializes in the same sport? Like, is it too challenging, or, what is the adventure that you get?
I think it's a really nice dynamic. Like we're both very similar in terms of like being super focused towards competing at this Olympics and wanting to win. Um, and it's really nice that we can share ideas. We have got like, whilst we still enjoy like the same sport, we've got very different approaches. I'm quite laid back, whereas Liv's like really focused and wanting to sort of do more and more. So I think we sort of like share our ideas together, and it brings out the best of us.
So what are the kind of hardships that you face in the relationship on a daily level? I mean, you both are training for Olympics, so it must be
Yeah.
pretty hard.
Yeah, so obviously, like in our lives, sports the number one like focus for both of us. So it's just little things. I'm sure every couple will like sort of understand this, but you get home and we're both absolutely exhausted from running 14 kilometers and swimming 4K, and then it's like whose turn is it to cook? Whose turn is it to clean up? And we're both tired and we don't want to do it. And yeah, so like it's just little things like that where you bicker, but at the same time you can talk about the sport, you can talk about how training's going, and no, it is really nice to have someone to sort of share that experience with.
So safe enough to say that you are each other's youth support. I mean, you're just the best cheerleader for each other.
Yeah, 100%. Like when I go to competitions, I get more nervous for Liv now than I do myself when I'm watching Liv compete, and I mean I'm going to assume it's the same the other way around. But yeah, no, like
Yeah,
it
absolutely.
makes it much more fun as well. Sorry, around just around like the competition. So when you've got a couple of hours of rest and recovery, you can just sort of go and support each other. If I have a rest day and Liv's competing, I can go and help fill up a water bottle or talk to her about the horses that she's going to be riding, and just little things that like make you feel more comfortable.
Absolutely, absolutely. And while we are talking about family, I believe
Yeah,
that you were born to a Malaysian father, right?
yeah.
So, did you or you, like, I mean, you or your family ever face any obstacles in the UK?
Um, I mean, my dad's actually just finished applying for his UK citizenship. He was very proud of his Malaysian passport now, but he's like after Brexit and some things that have made it, even though it's obviously outside EU, but making it more difficult to travel with the Malaysian passport. So in terms of that, he's had to go through sort of English language tests, despite the fact that he's lived here for 30 years. So that was quite funny. But inside the UK, I think we've been like very lucky as a family. Like I've always got on really well with everyone at school and had a really supportive sort of sporting club membership that have helped me get to where I am today. So no, yeah, we've been really lucky as a whole.
Right, right. Absolutely, absolutely. And if I had to ask you, how did your parents contribute in your success to becoming an Olympic champion right
Yeah,
from the start of your career?
I think I think very few elite sports people have got where they are without the support of their parents. I know I definitely wouldn't have been able to sort of start pentathlon when I was at school, and even before that, when I was sort of a more serious swimmer. Just being like the world's best taxi service, like picking me up from school, taking me to the swimming pool 20 minutes down the road, taking me home, getting me like feeding me in the car because there was no time to go and get food somewhere else. Um, and it's all the things you don't realize as a kid. So like yeah, I'm so grateful that I had that, and also sort of just taught me that the lessons like my younger brother made me the competitive person that I am. Like we were always trying to outdo each other when we were younger, comparing swimming times when we were the same age. Um, and like that's sort of the competitive spirit that I still have today. So yeah, I definitely wouldn't be here without the support of my family.
Right, right. We'll come to talk about your brother, but before that, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So I see that pentathlon is a very expensive sport. So is it financially accessible for a lot of athletes that want to pursue it, or is it difficult to sustain or get good sponsorships of the sport?
I mean, obviously, if you do five sports, it's always going to be more expensive than doing just one. Like that doesn't matter what the sports are. But at the same time, in the UK and I think a lot of other like pentathlon nations, there are really good options for getting into the sport. For example, when I started with the schools biathlon, which is just the
Yes.
running and swimming.
Yeah.
And I think those are in the UK are two of the most accessible sports. We've got loads of swimming clubs, and yeah, loads of swimming clubs, loads of swimming pools, and running especially is one of those sports where all you need is a pair of shoes and you can run anywhere. So like in terms of taking part in your first steps, it's so easy to get into pentathlon. And then from there to pick up the other three sports, obviously they are slightly more difficult, but for us we have like lots of clubs and sort of grassroots level programs where you don't even need to buy the equipment. They will lend you kit. You can go once or twice a week and just have a go. And I mean, for kids, who doesn't enjoy sort of fighting with swords and shooting pistols? Like it's a sort of like
Absolutely.
every kid's imagination going wild. So you can go to these clubs and just have a great time as a kid, and then once you take it more seriously, it the cost does begin to go up, but we are supported really well as a nation. So I think it's accessible, but you have got to sort of know the entry route into the sport as well.
Got it. Fair enough. Fair enough. You were mentioning your brother, and I
Yeah.
was just reading one of your blogs, and you had written that I mean, you guys compete since you were kids, but you had mentioned this particular line where you were slightly better than him. So that forms the question for me. Let's say that you both are competing in the same event. Who do you think would win? And would there be an actual blood rivalry, or would it just be an competitive, I mean, a fun competition for you both?
I think it would be a fun competition now. Um, I always say he's the clever one. So after sort of school, he went to Cambridge to study mathematics, whereas I went straight to do like to Bath University where I did full-time pentathlon training. So he sort of stopped the sport for 4 years, and now coming back to it, I think like we've had time to sort of each go our own way in life and have our own strengths and weaknesses. So whenever we do compete against each other now, it's more of like really nice to see the other one and hope that the other one does well.
But if you both were to race at Paris Olympics, who is taking the gold?
Over the whole five events, that'll be me. Um, I think yeah, I'm better now, but in the swimming race, purely the swimming, I mean, I'm not going to say he's going to win, but it would be very close. I'll never admit he's better.
Yes. I mean, we'll be rooting for you both. So
Thank
yeah.
you.
But yeah, yeah. So apart from like pentathlon, if
Yeah,
there was a parallel universe where you would have to compete in a different Olympic sport, which one would it be? I mean, I already know the option for you. It would be equestrian, something around equestrian, because you have contributed a lot to the sport with your opinions, with a lot of participation, and with a lot of I would say backing with all the wrongdoings. So would it
yeah.
be the same or would it be a different sport?
If I had to choose a sport that wasn't in pentathlon, I think I would actually play rugby sevens. That
Oh,
was
okay.
when I was at school. I said like I did a lot of swimming, but I also absolutely loved playing rugby. Um, yeah, I guess I was quite tall and quite fast as a kid. So yeah, I played a lot of rugby until until sort of 14 or 15 when all the other boys started growing and going to the gym, and I was still like the skinny kid who did a lot of running and swimming. So I quickly realised that I might be fast, but there were guys that are a lot stronger than me, so I had to start playing less. But no,
Right.
I would love to see how far I could go in rugby union. That would be a really fun challenge.
But if not rugby, would it be something like any game in equestrian or
Yeah,
no?
I would love to have the opportunity to have, because riding was actually the last sport I started in pentathlon. Um,
Yep.
so in a parallel universe, if I could have started riding from a much younger age rather than when I was 16, it would be amazing, yeah, to see sort of if I can, like, yeah, just see how far I can go in the equestrian world.
Yeah. So while we are talking about equestrian and Olympics, let's circle back to Tokyo.
Yeah,
You have previously spoken a lot of times about the whole controversy that happened. So
yeah.
I have a question for you. It says that given the incident involving mistreatment of a horse in 2020, that was the Tokyo Olympic Games, which prompted a one-fifth rule for the change of the sport. Do you think that they should still maintain the mistreatment? I mean, would they allow the mistreatment of the horse, or do you think that they handled it pretty well by canceling the entire event?
I mean, this has been a really controversial topic within the sport for since Tokyo for the last sort of 3 years. I think that there are definitely ways to sort of fix the problems, like the old-fashioned safety rules in pentathlon to avoid the mistreatment of animals, to encourage like rider education. Um, for example, one of the like easiest things to explain is that before Tokyo, and to some extent now, lots of riders can get away with qualifying for the Olympics by only jumping like relatively small courses, say 90, 80 centimeter jumps, whereas at the Olympics now we jump, I think it's 1 meter 10 jumps, and that difference is really big. Um,
Right,
from a like rider skill level, but also like the quality of horse that you need to be able to do that. And so if you haven't practiced on really good horses, and then you're going to get to the Olympics, and that's like the time you're going to be on the TV. You're going to have millions of people watching you, and that's going to be the one time where your riding skills might come up short, and literally at the worst time. So yeah, it's my belief that we could sort of encourage riding skills from right at the bottom of the sport. So from a younger age, from sort of under 19, under 21, and then that would carry through until you're a senior athlete. But unfortunately, the powers that be at the at the IOC and UIPM decided to get rid of equestrian completely, which yeah, to me was the wrong decision. But there's not much we could do.
so after 2020, as like a personal opinion, have you seen any big changes in the sport where it has put a smile on your face in equestrian, of course?
I think one of the positives to sort of come out of the problems at Tokyo was that all the athletes sort of banded together. It was one of those times where I think the majority of athletes wanted to keep horse riding, and it sort of encouraged us to really like sort of reach out and talk to each other and see what we could do to try and like help the sport as a like collective athlete voice. So one of the things that I've enjoyed the most is actually talking to the athletes outside of competition and seeing them as like friends, almost like chatting to them, just how are you doing, how's training going, and I think it's brought like the pentathlon community a lot closer. So that's made competing a lot more enjoyable, even though yeah we didn't get our way, but at the same time we've become closer, and it's really nice to sort of catch up with everyone at the competitions.
Right, right. So, are you aware of the recently Katie Prudent clinic controversy that happened in the
Um,
US?
no, tell me about it. What happened?
So, that's like it was just a very unconventional method where some of the horse riders claimed that the horse needs a good backing here and there.
Okay,
So,
yeah,
yeah. So it's fine. I mean, there are a lot of controversies that keep happening, but I mean, I'm just happy that there are a lot of changes that IOC has been making for the sport. But there's one question where it states that in LA, that is next Olympics, they
yeah.
are shifting show jumping and they are actually adding obstacle running instead of
Yeah.
that in the pentathlon. So, and you had said that show jumping or any equestrian sport has to be part of the pentathlon. So, will
Yeah.
we see you there or no if the sport is gone?
I mean, I don't want to give a definite answer because I'm not sure. I've not got any plans after Paris either way. But I think, like, as a sort of athlete movement, I know a lot of people I've spoken to have said that they're going to stop. So I think it's likely that I do choose to step down and find what's next for me in my career. But yeah, no, like it's such a big decision. It's all I've done for what, like 12 years now. And so I don't want to like consider, I want to be able to consider all my options, even like, yeah, as I said, I think it's sort of it's very likely that I stop. And I think a huge percentage of athletes will do the same. So that could be quite worrying for the sport in terms of how many athletes at the top do we have left to sort of carry the sport forwards in towards LA. But we'll see. Like I know a lot of the under 21s that are already doing this obstacle course racing say that they're really enjoying it and they've sort of just got their hands stuck in and they're trying to learn the sport as quickly as possible. So at least for them, they've got like an Olympic future. And despite me saying that I don't think obstacle course racing is the right way to go, it's very difficult to be too negative about it because you don't want to risk taking away the future for the younger ones. So yeah, it's quite a
Absolutely.
difficult situation.
Got it. Got it. So, while we are actually hinting at retirement, we saw that you were once at the London Fashion Week, like you had your walk there. So, do
Yeah.
you consider that as a career option for later in life?
I mean, I would be open to doing, I don't know, fashion shows. I don't know. That was for me. That was like a completely unexpected opportunity, and something I said yes to because it was so different. It was nothing like a sports, and I thought, why not? Like you've got to try everything once. Um, so I mean, I don't know if it's up to me whether that's an opportunity. I feel like the London Fashion Show has to invite me to come in rather than me asking. But I would definitely consider it if they did come calling again. Yeah, for sure.
But if not fashion, what are the other things that excite you or get your attention?
Yeah.
So if they become a later career option for you, would it be coaching?
I don't think coaching, I don't think I'm quite patient enough to cope with like every different type of athlete, like who sort of approach training in different ways to me. I would definitely be up for sort of mentoring some younger athletes, like sort of the ones that I think I could work with effectively with my sort of communication style. But as a sort of full-time career, this is, yeah, as I said, after Paris, I've not got any plans yet. I know I've got some options. I really enjoy doing like podcasts like this, interviews. So potentially something in the media like that would be something I'd have to look into and do some training there. Um, but also I did do a degree in mathematics when I started training at Bath University. So I could definitely go into, I don't know whether it's like sort of data analytics or consulting, like that sort of mathematical and data driven mindset is definitely something that I think I'll be able to bring to whatever I do in the future.
So it is safe enough to say that there is nothing in this world that Joe can't do. I mean, you. So, while we were referring to you being a master of many trades, our fans would want to know how a mentality of an Olympic athlete is. So, can you share some insights about how your routine would be for an Olympic training, and what kind of performance would you divide for all the sports?
Yeah, so like my Olympic training schedule is pretty tough. Like if you want to talk about that in terms of how I approach a week, we're lucky like that's sort of the head coach for pentathlon is the one that decides what training we do when, and they've sort of decided that on an average day, sort of 4 times a week, we'll get up. First session will be at 9, so we don't have any early starts, which is quite nice. But we'll run sort of between 10 and 12K. And then at 10:30, sort of an hour and a half later, we have a 3 to 4K swim, and that's a pretty standard morning. Uh, After that, we get a bit of rest. We get to have lunch and 3 hours or so to recover. So normally for me, that's I go home, I'll have lunch and catch up on some sleep if I can, and then go back in, and the next session will be at 3 p.m. And that could be anything from an easy fencing lesson or shooting practice or some strength and conditioning in the gym. And that's usually a lighter session, and then followed by something like fencing free play for 2 hours. So it's a pretty full on day, and you've got to be like really careful with your nutrition, your recovery, like stretching, seeing physio, massage, so that you can just consistently do that without getting injured.
Right, right. And that's all about being, physically strong. You must be aware that how Michael Phelps, Simone Biles, and other elite athletes have always spoken about mental health.
Yeah.
Do you think it's very important for, being at the top? And also, how do you tackle those struggles?
Yeah, I think it's like a really big thing that more and more Olympians are speaking about. Even in the UK, Olympians like Adam Peaty, Max Whitlock have spoken about that sort of finding that desire and like wanting to get back into the sport. Um, and at the beginning of everyone's career, you get into sport because you enjoy it, right? Like you don't do something you don't enjoy when you're a kid. And I think it's really important to keep that mindset to even when you're having a difficult training session, some part of you does enjoy it, whether it's like being with your training partners, like with your friends, or because you just want to push yourself and see how good you can be. But you've got to like maintain some level of fun and enjoyment, and it can't always be 100% serious every day because that just becomes boring and just mentally draining so quickly. I know for me, like over COVID, when we were put into lockdown, we were told you can only go and do one exercise a day, and this was right before this was only sort of 3 or 4 months before the original Tokyo Olympics were meant to happen. And I remember just sort of being shut in my house, and I wouldn't call it depressed, but I got really sort of I really struggled to sort of adapt mentally to being world number one, to being in the best shape of my career, and like super focused on this Olympics, to then being told that I have no competitions for 12, 13 months, like over a year. Um, and for me, like the thing that got me through was always like trying to just look at the positive out of any situation. Whenever I like, I mean, I struggled for 2, 3 weeks. I just went into lockdown and I stopped training. I did nothing and I played computer games like all day because I just didn't. I was like, what's the point in training? And I think that's something that everyone can relate to in COVID is that it was really tough. But the thing that got me out of that sort of like period of struggle was just began to see the positives in things. For me, one of the really big positives when it came to just running was that it was so simple. Like normally we spend so much time trying to juggle 5 sports, and all I had to do
Yep.
suddenly was one run a day. And it was
Correct.
just like refreshing. I wasn't completely tired the whole time from one session, and at the end of that lockdown, I was running quicker than I ever have, just because it was easy almost. Um,
Yep.
and yeah, so coming out the other side, I think just trying to stay positive, trying to like find one little thing about each situation that I enjoyed was like really key to coming out of the other side.
Right, right. So, do you think that times have drastically changed compared to COVID, like Tokyo Olympics, and then now? And how did you cope with them? I mean, even mentally and physically, like you said, it was a big task from doing 5 sports in a day to just focusing on one.
Yeah,
So, and now you have access to everything.
yeah.
So, how did you do well with that transition?
So we were relatively lucky in the UK. After the first lockdown, elite athletes got an exemption, so we were allowed to go into the training centre and access the facilities that we would normally. Um, and then it was just a case of sort of going from that one run a day to gradually increasing the load over the other sports. Um, and yeah, like I think when I compare doing competitions during COVID versus now, it's so good. Like we have spectators again. We don't have to go and do all these PCR checks before flights because that was one of the most stressful things about it. I remember actually before the Tokyo Olympics, like Japan
Yeah.
had quite strict rules, and they told our team everyone has to do a 2 day before the flight COVID test to check that you weren't bringing COVID into Japan. So I did mine and sent it off. I thought no problem. I feel healthy. There's no chance of me having COVID. But then the next day I got a phone call saying, "Oh, we've lost your test." And this was one day
Oh,
before we flew. So I had to drive
Yeah.
suddenly all the way from Bath to Heathrow, which is about a 2 hour drive. So instead of sort of having all day to pack to really think about everything I'd need for the Olympics, I was driving from Bath to Heathrow and I spent sort of 5 hours in the airport doing this emergency test. And I'll tell you, I did the test and waiting for the result there was more nervous than I was at any time competing. It was because
Right.
that would have been my competition just over before it began. So after that,
Absolutely.
the whole thing just felt so easy and so stress free. Yeah, and now I'm so glad that we don't have to deal with that.
Right. So while we are talking about anecdotes of your career, can you tell us any highlight or any hilarious incident that has become your favorite memory of the sport? It can be with your friends or a personal experience that you have had along the way.
I think one of my favorite moments probably won't seem like that big to anyone else watching, but I I obviously sort of didn't medal at a senior level for 4 or 5 years. Like I went to Rio Olympics, I started the laser run in second place, but I only finished 10th. And I had similar
Right.
experiences at some of the other World Cups where I was in medal winning positions and whether I don't know, I had a bad horse riding or bad shooting or didn't run fast enough. So I had sort of 4 or 5 of these experiences where I was almost there but not quite. And like in my head I was beginning to question like will I ever get a medal? Like can I do this? And so the first time I ever did get a medal at the European Championships in 2018, I
Yeah.
just remember crossing the line and like the other boys in the team, Tom Toulis, Sam Curry, were just there, and they were so happy with me. Like even though they might not have medalled themselves, it was just like a really nice team experience because we live together, we train together every day, and just sort of finally achieving that medal for me was one of those really like good feeling moments of my life.
Yeah. So you mentioned about Adam PT. I myself come from a swimming background. Like
Okay.
I am a giant. Yeah. I almost had almost 14 years of my life dedicated to swimming. And Adam PT, Phelps, and all other big names have always been an inspiration. So have you ever met Adam by any chance?
Um, I don't think we've ever had like a full-on conversation, but I've definitely bumped into him like at Rio 2016. We were in the same accommodation, and I've done some
Correct.
events. We were in the Wimbledon Royal Box together. So I'd like to think he knows who I am, but he's obviously a lot more famous than I am. So who knows?
But you must have interacted with James Guy or
Yeah,
maybe some of the other swimmers.
yeah. So like Tom Dean, James Guy, they all train
Yeah.
at Bath University where we do. So I know those guys
Right.
much better than Adam. And yeah, we'll sit down, have lunch together sometimes, or just have a chat, like how you doing, sort of thing, in around the training complex.
So if I'm not wrong, Tom is one of the best 200-meter freestyle swimmers out there. So have you ever taken tips from him, or does he secretly coach you like this is what you need to do, and this is what will help you throughout your event?
I mean, I'd love to say that I'm giving him tips, but I'm not. um,
Right.
yeah, I think we're lucky. So our sort of training slot is right after the swimmers finish. So occasionally, Tom has been having sort of technique discussions with his coach Dave, who's one of the best coaches in the world. So we can definitely sort of pick. So Dave's really happy to sort of talk to me, talk to some of the other pentathletes, and just give us some advice because, like, obviously, I would love to be as fast as Tom Dean. I think that would make me very good at pentathlon. But it's just about like sort of those small steps like that will save me sort of 1 or 2 seconds at a time. And yeah, so definitely try and like get as much knowledge as I can from them.
Yeah. So circling back to the inspirational talk that we were having, what would you say which is the most injury-prone sport of pentathlon?
I think it depends on your background. So for me, as a swimmer, when I started training more full time at running, I had loads of problems with my shins and my calves, and just like stress fractures in my feet. Um, so definitely running can be one of them. But then at the same time, lots of runners come in, never have any problems with their legs, but as soon as they start swimming more, they get shoulder problems with the muscles. So it really depends on your background. For me personally, it's the fencing because fencing is probably is the most explosive. Like you need to be really powerful and fast. And so
Yep.
for me, it's about managing my tendons because like my muscles in from the like gym and strength and conditioning are really good, but the tendons don't seem to manage very well. So I get really like painful tendons basically, and that's been a lifelong problem since about 6 years ago, where I need to do lots of work on making sure that they're healthy and feel good at the competitions.
Right. Right. I think that's all from us. You
Awesome.
have answered it enough. Yep. So that's all from my end, Joe. Thank you so much for giving us your valuable time. We wish you the very best for your training and for Paris Olympics. And I will be personally rooting for you.
Thanks very much. No, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank